Welcome to Calvary Baltimore B-Sides with our senior pastor, Josh Plantholt. Now with some in-depth commentary to complement this week's sermon, here's Pastor Josh.
Just if anyone is interested, I'm on the, I have my phone up and I can see the app. So if anyone has a message they need to send to me, that's definitely the place you want to contact me. Or even if you have questions, I can answer them from the app there. And I'm torn. It's good for the churches, for the church, if people are on Facebook, because then they can share it and engage and like it and all that kind of stuff, which really does help bring new people to the church. And I think that's great. At the same time, I like the app because the people that are registered and logged in are people from the church. And that's if someone sends a message to me, I want to make sure it's someone from the church that I can answer. Otherwise, we can go down quite a few rabbit trails and defeat the... And so, anyways, so if anyone wants to send a message to me or have a question, you can just put it in the app live chat there. So let's hop right in here. Welcome to B-Sides. We are in Revelation chapter 15, verses 5 through 8. And if you've noticed, I'm not my normal disheveled self. I just got it done at the gym, took a shower, and I'm taking my mom out for Mother's Day. So this is not sweat. This is just got out of the shower. So anyways, sorry. Revelation chapter 15, verses 5 through 8. Before we hop in here, I'd like to show you the structure of today's passage. So let me do a little screen share here. Yay! So here we are. We are in Revelation chapter 15. Here's verse 5, verse 6, 7, 8. And then here's chapter 16, verse 1. So when the Bible was originally written, it wasn't written with chapters or verses. And so this is a later thing, a later invention. And sometimes where they put the chapters and verses aren't always the best places. They're just not. And so the structure of today's passage really bleeds into chapter 16, verse 1. So I wanted to share that with you. So here we are. We have it's an A, B, C, A, B pattern. So really you want to think of it like this: A, B, and then in the center of the ABs is the C. So let's just look at this really quick. And if you'll notice, each section begins with Chi. It's the Greek word for and. So this is right after the song Chi. And you don't see the and in English, in the English Bible, in the ESV, but the Chi is there in the Greek. And after this I looked, and the sanctuary of the tent of witness in heaven was opened. And Chi, out of the sanctuary came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, clothed in pure, bright linen, with a gold sash around their chest. So the priests leave the sanctuary. Now, if I am correct, that means the other A should correlate, should resonate, should parallel in some ways the first A. So this is all the way down at the end of verse 8 here. Chi, and no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. So the first A in verse 5 is that the priests had to leave. And now we see at the end of the second A, and again, no one could enter the sanctuary. Same exact theme. Sanctuary was opened, and now the sanctuary came the 7 angels, 7 plagues, and so the priests can't enter back in. The priests leave in the first A. The priests can't enter back in the second A. Now B, the first B, verse 7. Chi, one of the 4 living creatures, gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever, which is just awesome. And so what we see is the wrath of God is seen. Now we go to the second B, all the way in chapter 16, verse 1. Kai. In English, it's then, but in the Greek, it's Kai. And I heard heard a loud voice from the temple telling the seven angels, go and pour out on the earth the seven bowls of God's wrath. Here we see wrath. Here we see wrath of God, wrath of God. We see seven angels, seven bowls, seven bowls. And so what we see from the first B is that God's wrath is seen. From the second bowl, or from the second B, we see the wrath of God commanded to be poured out on the earth. So how this works is God introduces the bowls. God shows us the point of the bowls. In the first day, God introduces us that the priests have to leave, and then we find out that the priests cannot enter back in the second A. Now, here's the focal point of this whole section, the C. Kai, and the sanctuary was filled with the smoke from the glory of God and from his power. Okay, so God's glory filling the temple is the focal point of this section of scripture, which as you know is how I taught a lot of the passage on Sunday. One of the reasons why these structures are so important, again, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I kind of do. When I'm preaching through a text of scripture, I believe verse by verse to be the most faithful method of biblical preaching. It's called expository preaching. The problem with verse by verse commentators or pastors such as myself is sometimes they say, okay, we're going to preach 9 verses on Sunday, 10 verses on Sunday, a whole chapter on Sunday. And I can dream, but that's not in my wheelhouse. What ends up happening is, as you guys already know, I could spend 2 hours on every verse, it seems, through this book. So what happens is when you get 20 verses, what happens is the preacher, he's preaching verse by verse through the Bible, but he's also picking and choosing where he wants to focus. Why chiastic study and structure is so important is because it's God's way of creating focal points. It's God's way of saying, this is where I want the emphasis of my word. And so as a Bible teacher, if I'm going to be faithful to the text, not just by reading the whole thing and trying to apply the whole thing, but if I'm going to be seriously faithful, then I need to put the emphasis where God puts the emphasis and not on the fringes, because that might be where I want to land. So I think this is a really important discipline that God's teachers should have. Or at least that's my conviction. Let's keep rolling here. So let's hop. We're gonna go through it again, and this time we're gonna dissect it. I just wanted to show you a broad picture there. So verse 5, Revelation 15. After this, I looked, and the sanctuary, the tent of witness in heaven was open. So the tent of witness, again, I ran through this a little bit on Sunday, is a way of emphasizing the two stone tablets, the commandments of witness within the ark, within the tent. Now, I was doing some rabbinic studies on the 10 Commandments this week, because this is what I do for fun. And come to find out, the stone commandments tablets that contain the 10 Commandments of God, what's really interesting is in a Hebrew mindset, in a Jewish mindset, in the books of Moses, in the 5 books of Moses, there are 613 different commandments. But from a Jewish perspective, if you took all 613 laws, all 613 commandments, and categorized them and put them in digestible formats, they believe from a Jewish perspective that all 613 commandments of the law are summarized by the 10 commandments. So you take all 613 and you could essentially fit them in the 10 commandments. And so from a Jewish perspective, the 10 represented the whole law. Now, I think that's fascinating, but we can go further. If we want to put the 613 laws into a more digestible format, we would get the 10 commandments. But the question that I had, can we reduce it further? And We can. If we go to the New Testament. I want you to remember Jesus was asked this question. So it says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" So there's 613, but it seems he might be looking at the 10, which is a summary of the 613. So really it's an open-ended question. And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." So the law and the prophets is Jesus' way of saying the entire Old Testament. So not just the first 5 books of Moses. Jesus is taking the entire canon of the Old Testament and puts it into 2 categories: love God, love neighbor. Jesus, so from a Jewish perspective, the 613 could boil down to the 10, but according to Jesus, who is God, who wrote the commandments, he says the 10 can be boiled down to 2. Love God, love neighbor. Thinking of Paul goes on to talk about it. I'm missing which book it is off the top of my head. Maybe Galatia. I could be wrong there. But he talks about how love is the fulfillment of the law. How love encapsulated. And some people like to say that that you can boil the 2 down to the 1, but I don't think Paul's doing that. I think he's just catching the obvious thing that Jesus is saying, is that love is at the heart of the law. And it's applied to love to God and love to man, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, the law, as we read on Sunday, the law brings wrath. And the way that works out is when we break any of the 10 commandments, or how Jesus applies them in the Sermon on the Mount, we thus prove ourselves to be loveless and selfish. Why? Because love is at the heart of the law. And so if we break the law of God, the 613, the 10, or the 2, we end up proving ourselves to be loveless, because to keep the law is love. Isn't that fascinating? So when we cheat on our taxes, when we lie, when we lust, ultimately we are doing one of 2 things. We are not loving our neighbor, or we are not loving God as we should. And so a violation of his law ultimately is a violation of his love. It rebels against God, who is love, and God will judge the loveless for their lovelessness or their self-love. What did Jesus say? In the end days, people will be lovers of self. And this is what drives me so freaking crazy when people say you need to learn to love yourself. We have far too many people loving themselves far too much. You could say that's the whole problem. You even notice the way people drive now? People drive and they're cutting everyone off. They're crazy. And I was talking to somebody about this, and I'm of the firm conviction the reason why there's so many terrible drivers now is because there's never been more selfish people on the road. I'm getting over. Deal with it. It's selfish people. And it's lovelessness. It's lovelessness of neighbor and God, and love of self. And so what we're going to see is, if we rebel against God, and I'm not picking on bad drivers, but if we rebel against God in any of these laws, really we're proving ourselves to be loveless or full of self-love. And unless a person puts their faith into the only human Christ, who loved God perfectly in our stead as our perfect sacrifice, then they will be judged as loveless, because they have broken the law of love. And I was thinking about this. I've shared this before. I believe that to be the most amazing thing that Jesus ever did on his ministry on earth. Jesus walked on water. He healed the blind. He healed all sorts of abnormalities, illnesses, sicknesses. He raised people from the dead. But I truly believe the most miraculous thing that Jesus did was that he loved the Lord God with all of his heart, with all of his soul, with all of his mind, and with all of his strength. Because I don't believe there has ever been one human in the entirety of our human race that has done that for even 1 second, loved God perfectly for even 1 second. And yet Jesus Christ did it not just for a second. He did it for the entirety of his life. He loved God perfectly with all of his strength, with all of his might, with all of his heart, with all of his mind, all of the time. That to me was the miracle of miracles, that God in human flesh could do that. Absolutely incredible, which tells us if he could keep the law perfectly, he loved perfectly. Why I think John put so much emphasis on the love of God in his letter in 1 John. Now, also, a really interesting point here. It's interesting that John does not say that the heavenly temple was open. Rather, he calls it again the sanctuary, the tent of witness. And this term is a term, the tent of witness, that plays upon the Old Testament phrase, the tent of witness. And this tent of witness is the tabernacle designs that Moses received from God at Mount Sinai in Exodus 25. So this is what's so fascinating. In Hebrews 8, 1 through 5, it's revealed, and we don't know who wrote Hebrews. I'm saying it's Paul. I think it was one of his sermons. I think maybe Luke helped him write it. But whoever the author of Hebrews is, isn't it fascinating? Isn't it fascinating? When we look at Hebrews 8, 1 through 5, and you could read that on your own for homework, it's revealed that the heavenly tabernacle were designs given to Moses in Exodus 25 on Mount Sinai, but they were to be a mirrored reflection of this heavenly tabernacle. So it was a copycat building of what God had already built in heaven. And so here, all this imagery we see in the Old Testament of the tabernacle, of the temple, John now is showing us this place exists in heaven. It's here. We're looking at it, which if you're a student of the Old Testament, that's just fascinating to think about. Also, one more thing before we get to verse 6. Inside of the tabernacle in heaven, inside of the earthly tabernacle and the earthly temple, the temple was divided into 3 sections. We had the Holy of Holies, we had the holy place, and then we had the outside court outside of the doors. That's where the sacrifices happen, the water basins, all that sort of stuff. So, but essentially, inside of the tent, inside of the temple, it was a building with 2 rooms. There was the Holy of Holies and the holy place. They were separated by a curtain or a veil. But really interesting, in heaven, there's no dividing wall. In heaven, the altar is near the incense, which is near the throne. There's no walls in heaven. There's no degrees of holiness in heaven within the temple system, in the same way that it is here on earth. That those who are near the altar can look directly into the throne of God, which you never could do in the earthly system. And so John here, he sees this tabernacle, and he sees that there's no divisions in it. The temple is wide open. And then verse 6, and out of the sanctuary came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, with golden sashes around their chests. So really interesting. It says that the 7 angels, who I believe are likely archangels, are clothed in pure bright linens. However, and this is something you don't need to know, but this is something I find really fascinating. In some of the earliest manuscripts of the book of Revelation, and what I mean by that, John wrote this letter, and he sent it to the 7 churches in Asia Minor. And so the letter would go, and then they would copy it, and then it would go to all 7 churches, and they copied it. Well, one of the early manuscripts, presumably not from the 7 churches, I would highly doubt that they messed that up. But somewhere down the line in the first few hundred years, some of the early manuscripts do not have that these angels wear linen, but they have it recorded that they wear lithon, which in the Greek is the Greek word for stone. So some of the early manuscripts say that these angels didn't wear linen but stone. Now, again, odds are that this is a copyist error, and it's just a very small difference in pen stroke. But it's possible, but maybe that's what they're actually clothed in, and those, when you read linen, that's the copyist error. And so, again, I think it means linen, not stone. But some of the early patristic fathers, they got copies of Revelation with this copyist error where they are clothed in stone. And so some of the early church fathers who received this stone copy, they believed that these angels were clothed with Christ, who is the cornerstone. And that's how they applied that these angels are clothed in stone, that they are so identified with the person of Christ, who is the chief cornerstone. And some of the patristic fathers get into some interesting details there. Again, don't need to know that, but I think it's a really fun note and interesting about church history there. Verse 7. Let me fix myself here. I like this chair, but I slowly start to sink in. You'll notice, like, about 2 or 3 times when I'm teaching, I gotta fix myself. All right, we got to keep rolling. And one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. Interesting. One of the 4 cherub hands out these golden bowls to these 7 angels. I find it interesting that the 4 cherub don't do it together. I mean, there's enough bowls that they all could share. But one of the 4 cherub is singled out to do this job. Now, we are not told who this cherub is. We aren't told anything about this cherub. But if I had to speculate, and see, I'm a question asker, and I say, well, what cherub is it? If we had to speculate, I would speculate that it would be the cherub with a face like a lion. And the reason being is the lion, and remember, the 4 cherub each had different faces, and one of them had a face like a lion, because the lion was a royal animal associated with the ark and the temple and Christ. In Genesis 49, Judah was called the lion tribe, and of course, Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah. Well, Jerusalem, which is where the temple and the ark are, is in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the capital city of Judah, the lion tribe. So again, just a guess, but something fun to chew on. Also, too, I really find this interesting. Verse 7, and the one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels, 7 bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. Isn't that interesting? It says the God who lives forever and ever. I mean, we didn't need to know that. We already know that. It's already been established. He is the God who is and who was. We just read that not too long ago, and we didn't read who is to come because God is come, which is why they sing that in the Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb. But here we see the God who lives forever and ever. And I would believe, judging upon the context of what's coming in chapter 16, that this is a dig at false idols. That Yahweh, that God is the God who actually is alive. And he's alive, not just was, but he's the God who is alive forever and ever, in contrary to idols who are lifeless and dead. I'm just wondering if maybe there's a connection there that we should pick up. Verse 8, our last verse. And the sanctuary was filled with the smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. We're done our reading. As we see in Isaiah chapter 6 and Exodus 40, which we're going to read those in a second, God's glory often manifests itself as either smoke or clouds. Have you noticed this? And part of the reason why God does this is the cloud or smoke acts or acted as a type of barrier between God and his creation. In the Old Testament, priests, as they came near the presence of God, you'll notice that they needed to burn incense, like a thick smoke of incense, and it acted as a type of veil between them and the presence of God. On Mount Sinai, God covers the top of the mountain in smoke, which of course is a picture of his glory, but also this smoke placed a barrier between God and the people. Well, here we are in the heavenly throne room, and it has been filling up with the smoke of the altar and the incense of God's people's prayers from chapter 8. But now the whole temple is filled. Every square inch of heaven, of this heavenly tabernacle, is covered in the smoke of God's glory and power and the prayers of his people. And for some reason, and I've yet to figure out a good reason why, the throne room is now emptied. God kicks everyone out. The saints are not allowed in there. The angels are not allowed in there. The 4 cherub have been kicked out. The 24 elders are off their thrones. This heavenly throne room is emptied of all but God. So I want to look at 2 passages on this. The first is from the prophet Isaiah 6:1. And we'll start at verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings, and people believe that the seraphim and cherubim are the same, but though there is a wing discrepancy amongst them. With 2, he covered his face, and with 2, he covered his feet, and with 2, he flew, and one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Just as a total side note, I want you to see that earthly worship is to reflect heavenly worship, right? We know how to model our worship by how worship is in heaven, because the worship in heaven is the worship that pleases God. I want you to see in Revelation chapter 3 that it says that the Isaiah 6:3, that the cherub or the seraphim, they called to one another as they said, Holy, holy, holy. One of the reasons why I don't like church services that are more like a movie theater. Have you seen this, where everything is so dark in the sanctuary and it looks like a concert or a play, and the lights are shining on the pastor, and you can't see anybody, or it's shining on the worship team. But one of the reasons why I like a lighter service, I mean, not that it needs to be bright, but one of the reasons why we sing is we sing to one another, and we should call to one another, and we should be able to see one another and sing to one another as to encourage one another to holiness. So just as a fun little note there. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And he said, Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. You know, have you ever see someone who says that they went to heaven and came back? When you see stories of people who go to heaven in the Bible and then come back, they're not talking about themselves and their wings and they saw grandpa. When people get up into heaven, they are consumed with the glory of God. And they also seem very consumed with the glory of the Lamb, and in Isaiah's case, the fact that they are sinners. They're not focusing on themselves, just as a little heads up. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth, and he said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me. Now listen to why God's smoke and glory is filling the temple. Verse 8, and he said, Go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the hearts of this people dull and their ears heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed. Then I said, How long, O Lord? Notice, like the song of Moses and the Lamb, Isaiah also asks a question about how about the world that does not fear and glorify God. Listen to this. And he said, until the cities lie in waste without inhabitant, the houses without people, and the land as a desolate waste. And the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. And though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. So in the book of Isaiah, this seems to be today's passage, similar to today's passage, as it's going to lead to judgment. Isaiah sees the glory of God, the smoke of God filling the temple, which leads directly to the same trajectory we see in Revelation 15 and 16. Next comes judgment. If we look at Exodus chapter 40, verse 34, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Are you seeing it? The priests have to leave, Moses has to leave, and they cannot come while the glory of God is filling the temple. Throughout all of their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the people of Israel would set out. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was in it by night, and in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all of their journeys. So when the smoke lifts, God is going to do something. His people, his presence will be on the move. And again, immediately after the 7 bowls are poured out, we see that Babylon is going to be destroyed, and the Lord is going to return and judge the nations. And here's my point. Whenever God fills his tabernacle in the Old Testament, something is about to happen. Often we see that judgment is coming, or we see that God is about to move his people. And both of those things are true in Revelation. That God's glory is filling the temple, and now judgment is coming, like we see in Isaiah 6. And the judgment was coming in Isaiah 6 to people who had ears but could not hear, and eyes who could not see. All these people in Revelation, they know that Jesus is God. We know this because we're going to see that they curse God. And so God is going to judge them for their hardness of heart. If we connect Revelation to Isaiah, we see the judgment is coming. But if we want to connect it back to the tabernacle, to the tent of meeting, which is what we just saw, or the tent of testimony, which is very similar to what we just read in Exodus, then what we know is that soon this glory cloud is going to move, and God is going to be on the move. And what happens after God judges the nations, after the 7 bowls, we're going to see that the Lord returns. And who's with him? His people. So just as the glory cloud lifts out of the temple, and then God's people are on the move as they follow the Lord, as they follow God in the wilderness, so after this smoke clears, Jesus Christ is going to be on the move, and his people are going to be with him. And just like in the wilderness, what happened? The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire led people through the wilderness and eventually into Canaan, the land of promise. And then, of course, that's the story of Joshua. The story of Joshua is the story of a man named Yeshua who conquers the land after 7 years. Well, what's the story of Revelation about? It's about the greater Yeshua, who conquers the land after 7 years. The promised land, the land of Canaan. And so when this glory cloud finally lifts from the temple, God and his people will enter into the land and claim it as their own. So this is really fascinating stuff that's happening here. Anyways, let's move. We had a long one today. Let's pray. God, we love you. We praise you. We thank you. We ask that you be with us, and you strengthen us, and you equip us. We thank you for all that you've done for us, and all that you're doing, and all that you're about to do. And we thank you for your kindness and your mercy. God, we pray that as your Spirit led the Israelites in the wilderness, God, we pray that you so fill us with that light. It's in John, he who walks in darkness and stumbles, the light is not in him. God, we ask that your Spirit would guide us. Give us wisdom and patience, and fill us with your fruit. Be with your people now, and in Jesus' name we love you, we praise you. Be with those who are sick, God. Help them. And God, if it's your will for us to partake in their healing, God, then use us. Help us to call, help us to text, help us to show up, help us to be present for the needs of your people. We do pray. In Jesus' name, we love you and we praise you. Help us to glorify you always. Amen. I love you guys. I'll see you Sunday. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this Calvary Baltimore B-Side. If you'd like to know more about us, visit calvarychapelbaltimore.org. Our email address is calvarybaltimore1@gmail.com. To financially support the work God is doing through Calvary Baltimore, go to calvarychapelbaltimore.org and click Give. And if you're in the area, stop by on a Sunday morning. For directions and service times, go to our website at calvarychapelbaltimore.org. Live streams and weekly sermons are available on our website, our Facebook page, and YouTube. You can also watch with our mobile app and on Apple TV and Roku. Search for Calvary Chapel Baltimore on these platforms for instant access to great Bible teaching and encouragement. We hope you've been blessed by this week's teaching. Until next time, as Pastor Josh says, study the Word, to live the Word, to share the Word. And join us again for the next Calvary Baltimore B-Side.